kind of walking down the pigment. It's kind of causing a gradation effect. There we go. Now, because this particular painting is designed to be done in like about 2 hours, I'm not going to go into super detail, but there's absolutely no reason why when you're painting you have to do it all in 2 hours. When I paint for myself and I'm painting, you know, something nifty and nice, I usually spend a lot more than 2 hours on it. It's usually a couple days. Just kind of depends on what you're trying to achieve. And right now I'm trying to achieve quick. So it's kind of a little messy. That's okay. It can still look nice even done quickly. Alright, there we go. It's a little crooked here and there, but that's alright. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of lighter color. So I'm going to take that sky blue we've already made. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kind of glaze towards the bottom where it's getting more shallow. And I think I'm going to add a little bit more green to it. Because in the nice tropical waters, sometimes when it gets closer to the shoreline, it gets a little bit more green. So it's probably going to end up kind of aqua colored. And again, the consistency is really thin, practically watercolor. I'm going to mix it a little bit with some of the normal blue here, sky blue. And take another dry brush here. And I'm going to add a little water to it. It's trying to dry on me too fast. You can use a medium to help you with glazing. It makes it a little bit more translucent. But I'm not going to do that because in my classes that I teach at the store, I try to make it as inexpensive as possible. I don't ask people to buy a ton of different things from the get-go. Because you don't have to have those extra things. They're just nice to have. They're just extras. I'm going to add a little bit more green. A little bit of water helps smear it along. And because I'm painting with more water than I am pigment, it makes a nice translucent, transparent effect. So you can kind of layer color on top of other colors and get a really nice effect. I'll come back in with some of my darker blue over here. And blend that in. I definitely need better light in here. That is something to keep in mind when you're painting is what kind of light you have. Definitely make sure you've got nice white light. I'm kind of limited to what's available in my room right now, so there we go. I'm gonna add a little bit more kind of light blue to the background here. And right now I'm not even using paint on the brush, I'm just using water to help smear it along. And that would be the dog hacking up a hairball in the background. The wonders of live video. Add a little bit more white, or I guess that's going to be the sky blue there. There we go. It's a decent kind of calm day on the ocean. Of course, it's not going to remain that placid for long. I'm going to add a little bit more of that dark blue in the background. As you can see, there's a lot of back and forth with acrylics, but that's how it achieves some of those really nice effects, is, you know, that layering of colors and paint. Again, just a little bit of dry brush here. Slightly damp paintbrush, smearing it along. Here we go. Alright, and I suspect my paint here is dry enough that I can do another layer of sand to cover up the ocean in the background there. Need more white. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the liquid white here. And then a little bit more of the orange or the yellow oxide, so it's nice and sand colored. There we go. Something else you want to keep in mind when you're painting is where the light's coming from. You don't always have to decide that from the beginning, but it's something you're going to have to consider when you get closer to being done. Something else is, you know, what's closest to you. Things that are closer to you are going to have more detail. They're also going to be more intense in color. Things that are further away are going to have less detail. And they're also going to be lighter in hue and intensity. That's not to say that they're not going to be dark, it just means they're not going to be quite as intensely dark. Kind of like when you look at mountains and they're all misty and purple. You know it's not really actually purple, that's just the light making it look misty and purple. So what I think I'm going to do is make this dune over here, the shorter one, a little bit lighter in color. And that's how we're going to kind of make the division between, you know, what's up here and what's back there. But I'm also going to make it a little bit lighter at the top, because that's where the light is hitting. And take a little bit of blue and mix it in with my sand color here. Kind of make a slightly darker grayish blue to make some shadows It's very light, so I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up. No, looks like it's picking it up a little bit. There you go. And then I'm going to use some, let's see, raw umber here. It's kind of a brown color. It's good for making shadows. I don't usually like using black to tint my colors because it tends to make things look really flat. It's usually better to use a brown or a blue or purple. Kind of blending this in today rather than layering it, just because it's rather humid, so the paint isn't drying super fast. So it's letting me blend. And adding a little bit more water. I'm going to hit the sides here, a little darker towards the bottom. It's going to need a couple more coats of that. I'm also going to come over here in between them and darken it up. It's where the water meets the shoreline there. I'm going to darken this up some more since it's blending so much. Just going to blend that in some more. Add it over here too. I'm going to take this brush here with no paint, and it's still damp from being dried off, so I'm going to use that to kind of blend that in some more. Just back and forth. Just barely touching the canvas. And then I'll come back over with the lighter color again. As you can see, there's a lot of back and forth and back and forth. Needs more white, so I'm going to lighten this up some more. So I'm adding some more white to my kind of sand color. And up on the top over here too, because there's still light hitting the top of the dune. Kind of blend it down. Just getting the paint off my brush, and it's just going to be slightly damp. I'm going to use that to kind of blend things in. Use the darker color again. It's a little bit more dark down there. Sometimes when you blend, you just have to go back in and re-blend if things get too soft. Use a bigger brush there. Let's see, this one's still nice and dry, so I'll use this to kind of blend. There we go. Sometimes a dry brush does a better job than a wet one. There we go. Just have to be careful that it doesn't peel everything off. Let's see. I'm going to go back and add some more white to the top of those clouds. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of my super light colored sand color. And this will help bring the composition together some more. So you don't have just one color down there and one color up there. It's a little yellow and it's going to dry kind of dark, but that's okay because it means I'll just, add more white on top of it. But it'll give it a nice layering effect. It's good to try to have a little bit of color everywhere. Help bring everything together. Wipe off my brush again, and then I'm just going to lightly blend that in. And it's not blending with the paint under it, because the paint under it is dried, so what I'm really doing is just smearing it down, making a nice gradation effect. You gotta work quickly because it dries fast. There we go. It's like the sun is shining on it all. And I'm going to use some more just plain white and go over the yellow. I'm just kind of dapping it on there. And then I'm going to come back in with another dry brush, or mostly dry brush, to pat that in and smear it and blend. Happy little clouds, just like Bob Ross. I'll wash off the excess paint, dry it off on the towel, and then lightly brush sideways. Smear it in there a little bit better. There we go. And now, let's see, we can fiddle more with the water. Alright, because I'm working so small, I'm having to use fairly small brushes. This is a liner or a script brush or a rigger brush, depending upon the brand name. It's a number 2, but they go all the way from 0 to 1. As long as it's really thin and long, you're good. This is great for making lines and reeds and all sorts of things. So I'm going to use some of our original white glue sky color here. A little bit lighter. And I'm making the water, or the paint, fairly watery. I want to still have plenty of paint, but it needs to be really thin so I can draw well with it. And I'm going to brace my hand against the table here. And I'm going to start drawing in kind of these little wiggly lines, where this is the surf, the ocean, where it meets up with the shoreline, making it a little bit lighter. And I like to break up the lines, and I just kind of make them wiggly and wavy. It's a lot of back and forth and squiggles. And I bring it onto the land a little bit because the foam usually ends up on the sand too. And I'm lightly, just barely touching the canvas. If you hold the brush against the canvas too hard, your lines will be really thick. And you also want to make sure you don't have too much paint on your brush, otherwise you'll get glumps and clops, and then it's not pretty. This is the hardest part, I think, for people. They seem to have a lot of challenges with this, but if you roll your brush like this, it's like you get paint on it, and then you roll it against the side of your palette, you get rid of the excess paint, so you don't see little big glops and bubbles on your paintbrush, but you still have plenty of paint on there. You can draw really lightly without ending up with these big globs. You just make a couple lines here and there. I like breaking them up and kind of overlapping them. You just don't want to do too many because then it gets busy. This is a very small painting, so a little bit goes a long, long way. Where I'm putting them also matters. I'm trying to put them kind of either under or over the darker spots, because that kind of represents the shadow of the water, where the waves are cresting or getting ready to. And again, you want to keep the line really nice and thin. The first time you start painting like a seascape, it's probably best to try to use a photo for reference to kind of get an idea on how you want the ocean to be. But once you've done something a couple times, you start getting the idea of how it should work and where everything should be placed. Yeah, see, that got a little too dark, but that's alright. If something's too dark, you can always just go over it later after it's dried and make it a little less pronounced. I'll come back here and make some of this a little bit more obvious. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to go over things a couple times. Alright, what I'm going to do now is, still with the light sea blue, I'm going to decide where I want some of the waves to crest. And what I'm going to do is kind of make little X marks, little crosses, and then bring it down kind of like in a C that goes this way. So it's high up here and then lower down this way. And then kind of squiggle it down. And you do that a couple times. You don't want it to be too overly pronounced, because again, these are small paintings. And you definitely wouldn't want to use the liner brush if you were painting a bigger painting. You'd probably want to use like a fan brush. But because this is so small, you know, we have to use a small brush. And we're going to put another cresting wave over here. And just make little X's. And then kind of wiggle it down. You also want to make sure you have some leading crest. You don't want to have too many cresting waves because it starts getting busy. I usually do 2 or 3. And something else, sometimes there's these little weird squiggles of, you know, the sea foam, and you can kind of do those in between the waves. Sorry, it's the dog hacking again. It's just like light squiggles, but again, really lightly, barely touching the canvas. I kind of make little figure eights and curlicues and wiggles and C's and little circles, like you're writing calligraphy. And keep in mind that they're going to be kind of curled a little bit because they're riding up towards the wave. There'll be a lot of sea foam in this one. Whee! Actually, it's my favorite part of the painting, is doing the sea foam. And then you can go back over and add a little bit more to it. There we go. Now I'm going to add just white. To do some emphasizing here and there. Just doing more little X's on top of the sky blue I did. Just a little bit here and there, not too much, because again it'll get overworked. You don't want everything to have the same intensity. Something else you can do is kind of a splatter effect. Again, you want to be careful because otherwise it'll get everywhere. Highly recommend wearing an apron when you do this technique, or covering up anything that's of great importance. What you can do also is like cover up the canvas with a piece of paper. I am going to use, you can use a toothbrush or you can just use like a fan brush. I'm going to use a fan brush just because it's, you know, here and easier. You want the water to be, or the paint to be fairly thin, but still thick enough that it will not be transparent when you flick it on there. I need a little bit more paint. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my finger and I'm going to brush it this way, and that's going to spit the paint onto the canvas. A little bit goes a long way, so you don't want to do too much. That just makes some of the sea spray. Works better if you have fingernails. There we go. Oops, that was a little bit too much, but that's alright. Made a nice effect. It gives it a nice randomness. Okay. We're nearly done. Woohoo! Alright, taking the thin brush again. I'm going to mix it in with some of my burnt umber and into the rusty colored yellow we had here. And we're going to make more squiggles. So we're going to start doing the reeds. And again, we want the paint to be kind of a thin consistency, but not so thin that it's so transparent you can't, it'll, you know, not have good coverage. You add a little bit of white to that too. I'll show you the color I have about. It's like there. And I'm going to twirl it off my brush. And then right here is about where I'm going to start. Using just the tip and barely putting any pressure, you flick it up, and that's how you start doing the reeds. Now you don't want to do too many of them, but you want a nice bunch of them. And you kind of stagger where you put the brush down first. And you want them really close together. And you want some of them to go up past the horizon line of the sea. It helps give it a little bit more of a 3D look. Some people like to make them curl down like that. There's so many different types of beach reed, bush, weed. You can really, you know, choose any type you want to do and it'll probably still look okay. Do another small grouping of them right here. And some right here. And just a few here, because they like to wander away from the main spot. Okay, let's see, let's do, whoops, too much water, almost made a splat. Do another big bunch of them right here. Well, be careful I don't go and cover up my wave though. But so far this is looking pretty decent. And I like to make the bushes kind of thinner towards the end of them. Make a really long one here and there. Forgot my really long one on this other side. Whee! Just barely touching the canvas. So and nice and fast too. That helps make the line nice and thin. There we go. And I'm going to take, let's see, this is a number 4. Technically I probably should have done this before, but that's alright. I'm going to fill in a little bit more in the middle here, just to add a little bit more volume to the bush. Technically you could have done this first, but it doesn't matter. As long as it gets done. So it has a little bit more mass to it. Still more or less the same motion. I'm just making it thick and short so it's a little bit more bushy. Alrighty. I'm going to take the liner brush again. And I'm going to take some of my sand color here and add it to my lighter sand color, because I want to make a kind of a tan color. Whoops! Brushes are rolling everywhere. So I'm mixing it right there. That's not quite dark enough, so I'm going to add a little bit more. And again, you could add some blue. Let's see if I have any blue that's still wet. I do. I'm going to add a little bit of blue to that. Because I want something that's a little bit lighter than what I had. It's kind of a nice, beige, sandy beige. But I don't want it to be too light. Because I generally do 3 layers of sand dune plant to help, do it really dark first, then a kind of medium shade, and then lighter. There we go, it's fairly decent. And we want it to be that nice liquidy consistency. Don't want too much paint on the brush, so we're just going to roll it. And then I'm going to do the same kind of motion as before, just flicking it. And you want to stagger it here and there. You don't want to do quite as many, because then it'll look kind of overworked. So just enough to imply that there's lots of reeds and the light is hitting some of them and making some of those dark and some of them light. You could actually even add a little green to them if you wanted. There we go. Oops, too much. That one was kind of wiggly. That's alright. Alright. And again, you don't even really have to let it dry between coats. Alright. Gonna get some white. Let's see, good place for it. It's right there. Gonna add that same color we had before. I think I'm gonna add a little bit of green. Don't want too minty though. I'm gonna add a little bit of the sand hue. So it's much lighter hue. There we go. See? And test it out on this small one here. It's a little too liquidy, but that's alright. Add a little bit more orange to it so it's a little bit stronger. Fun with reeds. Whee! You know, stagger where you put them. So some are a little higher and some a little lower. Doing a crappy job on this one on the side here. My can keeps wiggling. That's alright. Maybe this one's just being blown by the wind a certain way. Okay, and then go back to my original brown color. We're going to do some of the root systems. And I'm just going to kind of wiggle it around here. Go up to the top of the dune. We're in the home stretch. Woohoo! And again, just really lightly. Not too many. Otherwise it looks overworked. I like making kind of little, almost M-like shapes. You just kind of go back and forth between them. Just really thin, barely touching the canvas. Do it a little, oops, a little too thick there. That's alright. Add a little bit more bristle there. There we go. And then we're going to add some little fronds at the top of some of these. I'm going to make one long one. Get some seagrass. You want to decide which way the wind is going. Yeah, not all seagrass has this little feathery tassel on the top, but I like them. I think they're pretty. But again, just barely touching the canvas. Again, you don't want to do too many of them. And make sure they're all flying in the same direction. And you can add a little bit lighter color to get a little more 3D-ish effect. A little bit of the sand color almost, where the light's reflecting on them. And let's see. If you want to, do a little bit more with the let's do a little bit lighter there. With some of the root systems, make them a little lighter. And pretty much that's it. With any painting, you know, you can continue to paint until you think it's finished. Again, I want these to be kind of quick, so I don't do a whole lot of detail. You could put like some seabirds in there if you wanted. And I think I'm gonna highlight the highlight clouds again, because they look a little light, or not quite as accented as I like them. So I'm going to take a little bit of white again, re-emphasize some of those spots. Just be careful you don't paint over your fronds. It's mostly dry, so I'm just going to pat it. Just dab, dab, dab. And I think we can call this done. Actually, let me do one more thing. It's so easy to, you know, keep saying, oh, I see one more thing that could be done. Oh, that's what I've got. More than one thing. Okay. Gonna do a little bit of darkness down here, where the waves. Whoops, too much water. There we go. Make the sand down there a little bit more dark. Sand usually gets a little bit dark where the ocean meets it. There we go. Probably should have done that before I put the sand in there, but that's alright. Oops. There we go. And now I'm going to darken this up just on the side a little bit. Ended up painting over that little thing, that's alright. Just darken that up a little bit. I'll paint that back in. Just want to emphasize the division right here a little bit more. There we go. And let's make sure that's white there, so you can tell where the sands change. You can even, if you want to, like emphasize like some shadow underneath the fronds, but that takes more time. I'm lazy. I want to do the minimum possible. It just depends on how much time you want to spend on something, how much detail. I'm going to add in those fronds back real quick. Oops, need more umber. Real quick. Whoops. Just dropped the paint. There you go. And then you just sign it and you are done. Re-emphasize this reed real quick. Ta-da! Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. As you can see, it's really easy to use acrylics and they are really super fast. And if you have any questions in the future, feel free to email me or drop by my webpage. And I'm going to stop this tutorial recording video now. Thanks a lot. Bye!